Two birds, two bets, and of course the ever-widening circle of crazy people. The title to this video is "The Pay-for-Play Girlfriend." Not necessarily a new topic, but this one has a spin on it that I've been rattling around in my head for the last 2 weeks, and finally figured out, I think, how to explain it. I was inspired really a couple of weeks ago by a conversation that I had with a guy that's been a subscriber for a while. We finally had an opportunity to meet in person, and we had lunch together a couple of weeks ago, and he told me some stuff that just blew my mind. I didn't know existed, and it was about the dynamics between men and women. And it actually inspired me to do some research into this, because I thought I kind of knew the answers. And it turns out that I did and I didn't. I knew for a fact, and the research that I looked at backed me up, that men are visual. We have, we're pretty simple. If we see someone that's attractive in our mind, we know what's pretty to me may not be pretty to you, but we all have that little speck. It might be the body shape, or it might be the face, or it might be whatever. Yeah, it doesn't really matter the particulars. But we are visual. We admire what we consider to be attractive women, and that is the initial magnet that pulls us towards them to possibly initiate something with them and see where it leads to, if we can. Women, on the other hand, what the study showed, for the longest time I thought that it was just about rich guys, hence the pay-for-play girlfriend, that women are automatically attracted to you if you've got a lot of money. Well, there's some truth in that, and the pay-for-play thing comes in. Obviously, if you're talking about the world's oldest profession, sure. There are also women that will be your quote-unquote girlfriend as long as they're being showered with gifts and bling and whatnot, all AKA gold digger, all right? But those aren't the women that I'm talking about. Sure, they're out there. They're all over the world. They're not just here in Asia. So what is it that women are attracted to? I did some research, and I watched YouTube videos of women, actual women, talking about this very topic. I also looked into some research that social scientists did on this very topic. And it wasn't money. The number one thing, although there's 5 or 6 components that women are attracted to in a man, but the number one thing that kept floating to the top every time, or almost every time, was status. Was how powerful is the guy? What's his power base? He doesn't have to be totally attractive. He doesn't have to necessarily be physically fit. Actually, status and position ranks number one. Obviously not across the boards. Some women will disagree. They're after their looks and the Brad Pitt stuff. I get it. But for the majority, it is, of all things, status. And it makes perfect sense to me, because if you look at any rock star or movie star or politician or just plain out powerful guy, no matter what the profession, they always have this following and this some sort of magnetic attraction to females. It's just guttural, I believe. I think it dates back in the day when everybody lived in a village and the female was looking for a mate. Then she wanted the most powerful guy. What was he going to provide? He was going to be able to provide more than the guy that was the weakling, if you will. And so I just think that that's still a nature thing that has progressed throughout the years. It's not going to change. It's been there since the beginning. It'll be there till the end. Men are visual. We're going to look for the pretty girl as a mate, and the woman is going to look for the guy that can provide for her, and on a much more deeper level, much more complex. So the pay-for-play girlfriend, yes, it has its categories. Yes, it does exist. But when it comes to long-term stuff, it's much more complex, and it's also racist. And I'm going to relate to you now this conversation that I had with this guy. And it blew my mind. And it's tragic, and yet it's comical all at the same time. So here we go. I've known this guy for a couple, 3 years, I think, from the channel. We never had an opportunity to meet until recently, and we've had conversations back and forth, where we insulted each other on the channel, and good-naturedly, and we've been sort of friends via the channel. And finally, he landed in Dumageddon, and he said, "Hey man, I'm in town. Why don't we get together?" And so we did. And I went to go meet him, and he knew what I looked like, but I didn't have a clue what he looked like. So I showed up at the restaurant, and I was looking around, and finally this guy just said, "Hey Paul, I'm over here." And I said, "Oh cool, it's a Filipino. I didn't know that. I thought he was Australian or American. I couldn't remember." So I went over and I met him, we shook hands, got to know each other, we started shooting the breeze, and this not heavy, but this prominent Australian accent was coming across at me. And the guy, as I looked at him and sized him up, if you will, he was in his mid-40s maybe, obviously successful. He may have had a lot of problems, but money wasn't one of them. And he was fit. He had just come from the gym. He's perpetually working out and keeping himself in shape. Dressed super clean, neat, nice clothes, nice features, perfectly white, perfect teeth, big head of hair, beaming personality, big smile. I thought, man, this guy's got game, this guy's got it made. And so I asked him, what's your priority here? What are you doing? He says, well, in Australia, he says, I've made it pretty much at an earlier age than most financially. And he says, it's time for me to try to find somebody and settle down and get going. And he said, I went to Vietnam and bounced around there for a while and got nowhere fast. Nothing happened. And so I was talking to a mutual friend of him and I, which is another YouTuber, and that YouTuber said, well, man, if you go to the Philippines, you're going to be swimming in women. It's just the Filipinas are great. They're loving, they're caring. And if you're a foreigner, man, they're going to just fall all over you because you've got status as a foreigner, according to them. Anyway, sorry. So he comes here, and I said, so how's it going, man? He said, terrible. I said, really? He goes, yeah. He says, I watch you guys' YouTube channels, and I have made this statement, other guys have made this statement, is that wherever I go, if I make eye contact with a little kid, an older person, or a female, they smile. They just give me a smile. I smile at them, they smile right back, super friendly, everything's cool. He says, I've been here for over a week and not one person has smiled at me. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, why is that? I was still confused. He says, well, look at me. He says, what do you think I am? I said, Filipino. I said, you're not Filipino? He said, no. He says, I forget the ethnicity, but his mother was one race, his father was another race. They weren't anywhere close to being the Philippines, that's for sure. But that's how he came out, due to their mixed ethnicity. He came out as this little brown Filipino kid and grew up to be the man that he is. Again, successful, well-dressed, well-mannered, personality plus. And the story he told me about nobody would smile at him, nobody would talk to him, no one would acknowledge him, because they just thought he was another Filipino walking by. Nothing special. And I thought, wow, my perception of this whole thing has been skewed, if you will. Then he put icing on the cake. He made friends with an old white dude like me while he was in town. And he was a little reticent to talk about the age and the looks and everything. I said, don't worry, pal, I know what I look like. Just be candid with me, it's all right. He says, okay, Paul, he says, I made friends with this guy, I don't know what his name was, Bob. And Bob, he says, is like 70 years old, got a big pot belly, bald, he's got a checkered shirt on with striped shorts, looks like hell, got a big gravy stain in the front here, and he says he's knocking it out of the park. He's got this girl, he's meeting that girl, and he says, well, he's white as the driven snow, so I got to figure that's the catch. And I still was having a hard time believing him until this happened. He said, yeah, old Bob has met a girl, and she's got a friend, and he set me up with a date with her night before last. And I said, really? And he named the girls, or women, I should say. And I knew both of them. And I don't know how deep I want to go into this, but he named both of them, and I've known one of them for almost the entire time that I've been here. And she's actually been on the channel back in the day. I won't name her, but she is a professional girlfriend. She is a lady of the evening. She's all those things. And she spends a lot of the time, most of her time, online, making boyfriends, if you will, in clubs, doing everything as foreigner friendly as possible. And she really is kind of a gold digger. She swears to you that she's looking for that long-term love and affection and whatnot. But every time I've had a conversation with her, it's more and more and more. Yeah, he bought me a bike, but now I want a car. Now I got a car, now I want a house. Now I got a house, now I want a business. It never ends with her. And so, and I've known her forever. I haven't had any contact with her in 3 or 4 years, but I'm well aware of her MO. And her little friend, I know her too. I've never met her personally, but we have waved at one another. And I know what her deal is also, just via Chismus and Facebook and other reports in from other guys. So, he is with one of the easiest women I can imagine in town. They go to the Why Not. And remember, old Bob, he's an old dude like me, nothing like this guy here, who's fit and handsome, full head of hair, perfect white teeth, etc., etc., etc. Old Bob's there with his pot belly and his gravy stain, and he's at the Why Not. They're in a booth, Why Not being a disco here, if you want to call it that, here in Dumagetti. And old Bobby boy, he's sitting there, and this woman that he's with is glued to him. Glued to him. Can't get any closer. Petting on him, rubbing him, and making sure that everybody sees that she's with this guy. And I thought, okay. And I said, what's going on with you and what's her name? I'm not going to name her. He says, well, I sat in the middle of the booth, and she sat as far away from me as possible. She just looked like she wanted to escape. And he said, I asked her an honest question, and she gave me an honest answer. And I can validate that, because knowing the woman, we're friends, I do know that she, one thing, will not lie to you. She will, if you ask her a truthful question, she will give you a truthful answer. She told him, are you ready for this? She told him that she did not want to be seen with him. Even though he had all the money, even though he was a foreigner, even though he was dressed nice, even though he was buying all the drinks, because of the way that he looked, she said, all these, it's true, all these people in here know me. And they do. It's a clique, if you will, for years. From the staff to the customers to the other girls that are there, all kind of working the same deal, if you will. It's just sort of an element that goes there. They know her. And had he had been black or white or Korean looking, she would have been glued to him also. But the fact that he looked so Filipino, she told him straight up, all these people in here are going to think less of me if I am associated with you. They're going to say, oh, look, she no longer has what it takes to get a foreigner, because they won't recognize you as being a foreigner. I have to now, this being the girl speaking, settle for a Filipino. I'm past my prime. I'm no longer it. I'm too old or I'm unattractive. And that's going to be the perception. My status is going to be diminished. And I really don't want any part of you. And I said, man, that's the most racist thing I've ever heard in my life. He goes, I know, but it's the truth. And I know it's the truth. I said, so what are your plans? He said, well, I'm going back to Australia, man. He says, I struck out in Vietnam because of the way that I look. And I struck out here in the Philippines because of the way that I look. And he says, and I got no hope in Australia because guess what? He's not visually attractive to anybody, even though he's got all the components that a woman would be looking for. If she approached him, he says, man, half the women over there are obese and their personality, I don't know anything about Australian women, I know about American women, but he said they're bossy, they're this, they're that, the other. And I said, so what's your game plan, dude? I don't know. So let's just say a prayer for my little subscriber over there that's looking for love. I was going to babble on a little bit more about the situation in America, but I figured this is enough for one sitting. So anyway, thanks for watching, kids, and we will see you in the next video.